So I want to take you back to the front part of your notes where it says compound interest. In Algebra 1, you talked about interest, but you just talked about simple interest, which was this, I equals PRT. And simple interest is not compound interest. Compound interest would mean if you have money in a bank, and let's say you have $100 in the bank, and after the first year you gain some interest, like $5, now you would have $105 in the bank. At the end of that year, you would earn interest on the $105, not just the $100. So when it compounds, you're earning interest on the interest you've already earned. So this is the formula we're going to use for compound interest. It should be the same one you'll use in personal finance. So let me just explain what each of these letters mean, and then we'll go to the back of these notes and talk about how to use them. So to start off with, the A represents your ending amount. How much you're going to have after all the interest has accrued. The P represents the principal, or the starting amount. The R represents the rate, and again, our rate is going to have to be turned back into a decimal instead of a percent. N, notice we have N in two places in this formula. N represents the number of times per year. I'll have to use black here. Number of times compounded per year. And I'll come back to that. The T represents time in years. So the N is the one thing that's just a little bit different here and we want to talk about. So N represents the time that something happens per year. So if I said that something happened annually, that would be one time per year. If I said it was semi-annually, what would that be? Yeah, semi means two, so it would be 2 times per year. What about quarterly? If you think about how many quarters in a dollar, that would mean it would be 4 times per year. If something happened monthly, we would say it happens 12 times per year. And if it happened daily, it would be 365 times per year. So that would all make sense when we get to the back here. So let's go to the back of the worksheet then, and let's kind of finish where we left off on a few of these word problems. So I believe we left off with this one. Zachary invested $130 in an account, paying an interest of 3.6%, compounded daily with no deposits or withdrawals are made. How much money to the nearest dollar would he account for after 11 years? Okay, let's go through and dissect this and see if we can figure out what each of these things means. So he invested $130. So that's going to be his principal. This is how much he starts with. It says that he has an account that pays 3.6% compounded daily. So 3.6, if I change the 3.6 to a decimal, I move it 2 places away from the percent sign. So R is going to be 0.036. It says that it happens daily, so that means that it's going to happen 365 times a year. And I believe that's all we need to know. So let's go put those numbers in our formula. A equals P times 1 plus R over N to the NT power. And I'm going to give you that formula on the test, so you don't need to memorize it. If you're in regular Algebra 2, you'll have your notes you can look at for online. So A equals 130 times 1 plus 0.036 over 365 to the 365 times 11 years. Now, it just gets a little bit tricky typing this in. If you want, you can figure out what this is by itself. I just type the whole thing in my calculator at once, and I'll show you how I do that. So I'm going to have 130 parenthesis. Now I'm going to type this part. So 1 plus, and then for that fraction, I'm going to need to put a parenthesis, 0.036 divide by 365. And that's how I would do it if I don't want to use the fraction key. So this is the 1 plus this part. Now I have to close it out with the parenthesis and take it to the 365 times 11 power. And I get 193.159. And this says to round it to the nearest dollar. So this will be the dollar. If I look back, I have to decide if the 3 is going to stay the same or round up, and it will stay the same. So you have $193. So what this tells me is if I put $130 in the bank, and the percentage rate is 3.6%, and it compounds daily, this is how much money I will have after 11 years. Okay, let's do example 2. Austin invested $60,000 into an account paying an interest of 4.7% compounded quarterly. Assuming no deposits or withdrawals are made, how much money to the nearest dollar, $100, would the account be after 11 years? Okay, so he's going to deposit $60,000, so that's our P. An account paying an interest of 4.7, so I move the decimal 2 places, so R equals 0.047. Compounded quarterly, so if it happens quarterly, it's going to happen 4 times a year. So that's N, and then it's going to happen for 11 years. So let's plug this into our formula. The amount we're going to get is our principal times 1 plus 0.047 over 4 to the 4 times 11 power. So plug that into the calculator. If you see at home that you are just not getting the same answers, I'll be glad to Google Meet with you or do tutoring to make sure that you know how to put this all into the calculator. So this is 16,0316.55. So it says how much to the nearest $100. So this is 10. So there's the $100 place. I look back, so this is going to stay the same. I didn't need a comma there. So it's 160300. So $160,000. All right, last one. So David invests $350 in an account paying an interest of 3.5% compounded daily. Jack, okay, so we've got 2 guys here investing money, and we want to know who has more after a certain period of time. So let's start with David on this side. David is going to invest $350. So let's find his amount. He puts $350 and 1 plus, his rate is 3.5. You could write that as 3.5%. So it's going to be 0.035. And he's compounding daily, so 365 goes on the bottom. And 365 times 5 years goes here. Jack, he does something different. He takes his $350 and puts it in an account that has 3 1/4, which is 3.25. So 1 plus 0.0325. And his is compounded quarterly, so it happens 4 times a year. Well, it looks like that. So type both of those in and see which one gives me the best deal. So David is 350 times 1 plus 0.035 divided by 365 because this is daily. So he has $416.93. Okay, let's go over to Jack here. And he has 350 times 1 plus 411.48. So it says how much more would David have than Jack? So I'm going to subtract those two amounts. 416.93 subtract Jack's 411.48, and so $5.45 says to the nearest dollar. So he has about $5 more. Now that problem is a little time consuming, but I think I only gave you 2 in your homework.